Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good evening, folks. Welcome to NIC's panel discussion on the new normal in education. I have some amazing panelists here, as you all can see, and they're all playing a pivotal role in shaping our education and learning system in Pakistan. I'd like to thank all of our panelists for taking out their time to talk to us about the challenges, the new initiatives that are being taken in the new normal in education. As you all know, the COVID-19 situation has resulted in schools shutting down all across the world. Globally, around 1.2 billion children are out of the classrooms. And as a result, education has changed dramatically, especially with the distinctive rise of e-learning, and whereby teaching is now taken remotely and on different digital platforms. Today, we're going to be talking about some of the challenges that our educational institutions are facing, along with the new initiatives that they will be coming up with to ensure students receive a quality education. We will also be discussing the pros and cons of online versus traditional and conventional learning methods, and I'm looking forward to this constructive discussion with all of our panelists. I hope I can do justice in introducing all of them one by one, although all of them are doing remarkable works in their own domains. I'd start with Talhah Munir, who is the CEO of the Knowledge Platform Pakistan. He is an expert in design of learning solutions for corporate education sectors in Asia. He has led many successful learning inventions inside and outside Pakistan during his 19 years at Knowledge Platform. So welcome, Talha. Welcome on board for this panel discussion. My second panelist is Jaweria Sethi. She is the founder at Edopia. Edopia, as you know, is a very new way of a new method or model of learning that Edopia has introduced for children. Jaweria is an educationist. She's a staunch believer in the potential for young children and is trying to develop the 21st century learning spaces that harness the natural pathway of human development. And obviously, they're doing an amazing job. She's also coming up with a lot of new initiatives for online learning for children who would like to be homeschooled as well. So we'll talk more about that. Jaweria, welcome to the panel. I have Nadine Murtaza here. She's the executive director at Headstart. She looks after the IB PYP program. She's the founder of the NJ's House and Hire Bolo, which is a children's publishing startup, I think, which started about 6-7 years ago, I believe. That's the first time I met Nadine in person as well. She's also a TEDx speaker and a mother of 2 children, a proud mother of 2 children. So we'll be talking more about parents and advices that we can give to parents in this discussion with Nadine today. Welcome. I have Nassir Kasuri here. He is the executive director at Beaconhouse Group. As you know, Beaconhouse, the educators, they're all a combination of about they have about more than 300,000 students in 5 countries. He's educated, so Nassir Kasuri has been educated from LUMS, and he's the director IT at Beaconhouse as well as the CEO of the educators. We'll be talking more about your journey as Beaconhouse Group and how it all started, Nassir Saab, and I'm happy to welcome you to this panel today. Last but not the least, we have Sabeena Abbasi. She's the content manager at Orenda. And prior to joining Orenda, she also taught in a lot of schools. She served some of the schools and different impoverished populations in Pakistan as part of the Teach for All campaign. And apart from working in the education sector, she also set up her own initiative to financially empower marginalized women by giving them access to markets to sell homemade arts and crafts. So welcome, Sabeena. Welcome to the panel today. Happy to have all of you here, and I hope we have a really nice discussion on the new normal in education. I'd like to start off by throwing a question at all of you, the same question pretty much. Knowledge Platform, Beaconhouse School, Headstart, Edopia, Orenda, these are all institutions and companies that were once just an idea. And I would like to know what has been the vision behind each of them, and could you briefly share a bit about your journeys and how you have basically grown over the years and brought the institution to where it is today. So we can start off with Talha, and then I can quickly go to the other panelists.
Thank you. So Knowledge Platform was founded in 2000 in Singapore as a learning solutions company. So for initial like 13, 14 years, we were focusing on online learning for corporates, for companies, providing them online courses. We developed more than 1,800 online courses in 30 plus languages. But then we realized that whatever we are doing, we are not really creating any social impact. And that's when we decided to move into school education, grade 1 to 12 education, as we call that, K-12 education sector. And we sold the corporate learning business to Thomson Reuters in 2013. And then we started a transition period. And then 2014-15, we basically developed a blended learning solution, the first version of our blended learning solution that we started. And we started doing pilots in Pakistan. But at that time, there was no demand when we used to go to school and tell them that, okay, this is blended learning and, you should be using the learning and, technology is coming in every phase of our lives. And, you should be also using it in schools and classrooms and the way you teach. We used to get a very kind of response, oh, it will not work. It will work probably in Singapore or outside Pakistan. So then in 2015, we basically went to China. We did a joint venture there, and we started with one school in Shanghai. And now our solution is being used in 1,000 schools and over 400,000 students in China in China. And that was the technology, the platform that we built, and we exported from Pakistan. So it's a rare example of IP exported from Pakistan to a country like China. Otherwise, we always kind of import from there everything. So and then in 2018 we started rolling out again started focusing in Pakistan. We started with Jazz Smart School, a big project of 75 public high schools. It's the biggest large scale implementation of a blended learning solution in Pakistan with over 38,000 girls and 1,000 teachers across 75 public schools of Islamabad. And then the journey started. Then we started working in private school. We started with one school, and now overall we are working with 730 plus schools and 260,000 students across Pakistan. And just to give you an idea, just during last 8 weeks after this post-COVID situation, we launched a new product and we brought in about 290 schools who signed up for our solution and about 60,000 students just in these 8 weeks. So this is the summary of what we are doing. We want to basically focus, our mission was to focus on quality of education in Pakistan. And certainly we will discuss that later, that we now also have an access problem because the students who were in school are, now are not able to go to school. So we'll, yeah.
All right. Well, that's remarkable. I mean, in 5 years, you were able to see a lot of growth since you initially started with the China project. I think my next panelist, Jaweria, if you could answer the same, what has been your vision behind Edopia? I have personally seen it grow over the years and have been a part of its inception as well. So I would just like to hear your thoughts and your journey.
Okay, so basically Edopia's vision has been to create some small self-sustaining learning spaces which are democratic and progressive in nature. And हमारे लिए the thing that has been the most important is the voice of the child. And what is it that the child wants to be in place for his or her own learning. So इसी vision को साथ लेके we have been moving forward for across around these 6 years. And basically, I went to a very good school. Nassir is here. I'm a Beaconite. So I went to Beaconhouse for 13 years of my life. And alhamdulillah, the school really benefited me and has helped me be in a place that I am at today. But when I went to the university, I realized that the aspect of community and choice really plays a very important part in your learning as well. And at that time, I thought, okay, maybe there are certain learning spaces which do allow children to make choices with respect to their own learning, maybe they might be able to respond to their own innate curiosity and social ability better. So that was the idea behind Edopia, and Edopia is the first community of its sort. It took us around 6 years to develop it and where we are today, and obviously there's a lot more to do as well. But it became a lab of sorts for us. So now we're looking at other ways how we can extend the ideology and the way of learning to, to make it more available for the masses, how we can make it more accessible and affordable. So some of the things that we're thinking about are now along the lines of making such community-based learning accessible for a lot more people.
All right, interesting. Thank you, Jaweria. Nassir, would you like to add how, I mean, we all know all over Pakistan, people know what Beaconhouse is. So I would just like to know where the journey started and how it has come so far.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I mean, it's the journey started about 45 years ago. Beaconhouse was founded in 1975, and it really started in the most humble way imaginable. It was started by my mother, in the top floor of her grandmother's, house in Gulberg. Because and I think that a lot of times some things that become really big, they start off with a realization of need. And I think in the case of my mother, it was it was a very personal need. She was a young mother when she started, and there were no good schools for her to send her kids. I'm the youngest of the brothers, and I was born just after Beaconhouse was started, but she had no place to send them, so she decided to open her own school. And of course it was a need that was there. It wasn't just her. There were, I think, mothers and parents all over Pakistan that were looking for quality education for their kids. And though it started in a portion of a house, it grew very quickly. Students, because there were no options at that time as such. And the private schools, the private school setup as it exists in Pakistan wasn't really there. So in many ways, we're quite proud of the fact that Beaconhouse played a strong role in essentially writing the rule book or guidebook for private schools in the country. And a lot of our teachers, in fact, and trained professionals and students, mashallah, have gone to really make huge contributions to education. So we're incredibly proud of that. So it was kind of not just the start of Beaconhouse, but I think we're privileged that it was in many ways the start of the private education sector in Pakistan. I think the one thing about Beaconhouse that for me has always been a tremendous source of pride, has been the role that the organization has played in female empowerment. I mean, you can imagine even right now in Pakistan in 2020, you wouldn't say that it's the most equal country in the world necessarily, but in 1975, you can imagine what the situation was like. It was pretty much unheard of, for women to work at all in any capacity, in any field, whether teaching or senior management, definitely. And Beaconhouse really created a pathway for women to start working. And it was one of the first organizations, I think, that had a predominantly female workforce. And even today, that's the case. So, in Pakistan, 62% of our employees are still women. And more importantly, almost 70% of our executives, senior management is female. So even today, Beaconhouse is playing a very strong role in female empowerment. And I think it's an area where we still have a long way to go in Pakistan. And, and as an organization, we feel that, our role in driving Pakistan in that direction is something which is one of the most important things we really do. You know, the last few months have been tough, of course, but they've sort of forced us to, you know, really think about what the future holds for education. So I would say that this is like maybe another, you know, chapter in Beaconhouse's, you know, development journey, which is, I suppose, something, you know, we'll be talking about. But so for us, you know, in the future, apart from anything else, one of the things that we really are now looking at and allocating a lot of time and resources to is really thinking about education technologies, how the education landscape is going to change in the future, and how we want to be a part of that. So that's, you know, in fact, you know, Talhah is here. You know, we are one of the sort of investors in Knowledge Platform also, and you know, they have a tremendous vision, you know, and so we're proud to be associated with them, and we're increasingly now trying to sort of get more involved in ways of delivering education, which are, you know, 21st century ways of really actually delivering education to the student. But of course, what is education is another question, and I hope we get a chance to discuss that in a bit more detail during this this session as well. But yeah, it's a very interesting time for us at Beaconhouse.
I agree, and I think some of the challenges that you just mentioned will quickly address some right after this question as well. Nadine, I would really like to know what has your journey been with Headstart, with Tire Polo, and how you have come here in the past 6 years.
So I just want to say Assalamu alaikum to everyone, and also
Alaikum salam.
Panelists. I'm so excited to be doing this with you guys today, and I think there are notes in common with everybody's journey. I think my journey has a lot in common with, you know, like Nassir was saying, Mrs. Kasuri started the Beaconhouse from a garage. My mother started, or from her grandmother's house. My mother started Headstart from a garage at the back of my grandfather's house. So I think a similar trajectory in terms of growing up together. I want to say, like Jaweria, I am also a Beaconite, and I spent some of the best years of my schooling there, and very proud of it. Lots of lifelong friendships from that time. And then I think a lot of what I did when I began working, I think it's a similar story as to what Jaweria did. And at one point, Jaweria and I were both running brand new schools kind of side by side, and we were neighbors. And I feel so reassured that there is somebody else trying to do what she's doing. And then of course, we collaborate so much with the Beaconhouse IB schools, TNS and Newlands, and some of the other campuses, the ones that are in Islamabad and the ones in Lahore. So it is nice to sort of share this space or share work in common with people who are trying to push the envelope in terms of finding better solutions to the problems that we see around us and to the needs we want to make. And I think for me as an educator, you know, similar to what Jaweria said, is that I feel that my education, you know, I had a wonderful time. I think it empowered me to be a creative person, to be a problem solver. But when I went to university, I saw that I was at a disadvantage in terms of technical skills, like being able to research. I think academic honesty was something that was missing in how, you know, I was trained at the high school level, and it became so important. And more than that, I think cultural issues like asking questions, asking for help, working in teams without collaborating instead of always competing. I think these are things that were challenging, not only in university, but, you know, as I work in Pakistan with colleagues, I see that I'm not the only one with these barriers or these personal obstacles, where I have really had to work to become someone that asks questions or that asks for help or says, I don't know. And so small things like this, I think something that I've become very fascinated with in my career and in the last 6 or 7 years of running a progressive school include culture and the hidden curriculum or the hidden culture that comes out at school. And so I'm very fascinated with and taken up with curriculum design and content. So I think the content element kind of links to what Talhah has been doing. Of course, Talhah has been working in technology and content. I've only worked in content. I remember growing up, our textbooks were always from Singapore or Malaysia, and going to a good private school meant that your textbooks, the materials you were learning with were not made in Pakistan. And while that gave us an edge in some ways, I don't think that it's a great solution, and it's not a great way to raise kids to grow up believing and understanding that everything good is going to come from another culture. And so making local content, developing our own materials, I think is something that's very important. And that is one of my favorite things about working at an international baccalaureate school, because they say no textbooks. So that's, I think, where I am right now.
All right, thank you, Nadine. We'll talk a bit more about the content creation and all the different initiatives we can come up with collectively as well. I'd move forward to Sabeena. So Sabeena, Orenda is also doing a lot of amazing things. I mean, you were just a few years ago a small startup as well, and I've personally seen Orenda's growth over the years as well. And I'd like to just know a bit about the journey and tell our audiences how you guys came to where you are today.
So thank you so much for this discussion. I want to start by saying I'm also a Beaconite. So we should be proud that most of the people here representing are from Beaconhouse.
This was not staged at all.
And I'd like to say I'm also on the board for Teach for All, by the Teach for Pakistan. So you've been in that. So we're all connected.
Yeah, some
We
way.
are, definitely.
This is what I was actually having a feeling when everybody was introducing themselves, that one thing that's common is for the love for education and the love for bringing innovation in education that we all have. So that's just wonderful to see so many initiatives being taken in Pakistan, especially I remember when the COVID situation happened and the government, for the first time, I think didn't have to import something from outside the country. They had edtech content available within the country. So that was, I think, a huge success for Pakistan, that we have been present in the country and working since past 7-8 years. So Orenda, again, like I think Headstart and Beaconhouse, it's also started in a small room, but it started in a slum area of F11. And I think there, the questions, when you, I think, step in a place which is very different from the setting where you come from. Like, for example, in my personally, the first time I stepped into a government school was a huge shock for me. And obviously you kind of see the stark inequality that we're living in. And these places are right next to our homes. It's not like they're far off from where we live. So that kind of really shocks you, that what exactly is happening, why are there so many differences. So that, I think that led to a nationwide research campaign where the team of Orenda actually stayed with villagers and very, very low income people to actually assess that what exactly is the problem. If education, is there a problem with parents not understanding the importance of education? Is there a problem with content? So after all of that research, Taleemabad animated series came into being. And just like Nadine said, we focused a lot on localized content, because I think that's what was missing in Pakistan, that we were importing books from outside and children couldn't actually relate to what they were studying. And there's a live example which we experienced in one of the villages in Pakistan, where a simple parameter was so difficult to explain to a kid, but when we related to a farmland where you used to work every single day, they picked up the concept instantaneously. So that really made us realize that there's a huge gap of localized content which needs to be there in Pakistan. So yeah, currently we have over around 300,000 users, which we're expected to increase till 1 million till December. But currently, I think the scenario for edtechs is really really great because of this COVID pandemic, and it has actually forced us all to come together and work together, which is, I think, just amazing to see everybody working together.
That's true. I'd like to now come to the challenges. I mean, I'm sure all of you in your areas, in your institutions and companies are facing some sort of challenges in the edtech space and your schools as well. So what, in your opinion, are some of the current challenges that you guys are facing to provide a good quality education to the students? And in the near future, provided this is the current situation and it prevails, what are some of the foreseeable challenges that we all should be keeping in mind? Again, I'll start with Talha and then we can take turns as well. So Talha, what about you? Aapka mic mute
Yeah,
pe.
thank you.
No
So
worries.
I think the challenge I see for schools and parents is that how to operate in this environment. Obviously, if I divide the challenges into pre-COVID and post-COVID, I think the pre-COVID situation was a situation, if you look at the total numbers, we have a total of about 67 million school-going population. Out of that 67 million, we have 22 million out of school, right? And so it leaves us with about 645 million. And out of, if you do a split, private sector has about 21 and a half, so you can say about 22 million students, and while 23 million students are studying in the public sector. So these 45 million kids, they were going to schools, and with the exception of very good high quality school like Beaconhouse school system and educators and others, like, in which among all the networks, about 900,000 students study. So even if you count that as a million, you are left with the rest of the private school market, which is providing education, or public schools, right? And for the most of these, I would say 44 million students, they are not getting good quality education. They were getting through the grades, they were focusing on getting marks. The focus was on rote learning, memorization. And as a result, we can see the quality indicators going down, whether you take a national survey like annual status education report of like last 5 years, you would see a consistent trend. You would see that the grade 6 students, they cannot do the skills which are, can be done by grade 3 students. So 2 students, they cannot read a paragraph in Urdu. Also 60%, more than 60% students cannot read a paragraph in Urdu, for example. So these are the issues in Pakistan. And if you look at the international benchmarks about Pakistan, then you can look at the Human Capital Index 2019, which is very interesting because it tells us that Pakistan is ranked, I think, 139 out of 145 in Human Capital Index. And one of the things they were tracking was the numbers of years you spend in school for so many years. But then they realized that it's not enough. You have to introduce a new metrics to determine the quality, the level of youth that we are producing. And they introduced a new metrics, which is called LAYS, which is Learning Adjusted Years in Schools. So for Pakistan, the total number of years a kid spends in school by 18 years of age, on average, is 8.9 years. So that's a total schooling. Whereas, it's close to 13.9 years of schooling in US and Singapore. Singapore is, I think, so more or less they are equal with some difference. And if you look at the actual learning adjusted years in school, then Pakistan is at 4.9 years. So our kids basically are learning 5 years of learning. They are, actually getting 5 years of learning by 18 years of schooling. So that's the level. And that's why our kids are 39% productive. And that's why we are so low and, on the human capital index. But this is the story of our not only education, but that even our brightest kids, when they go to universities, after a very competitive process of going through NTS and other testing, other exams at university level, they have to go through orientation courses for basic sciences as well. So this is the level of quality, unfortunately, that we had and that we have, pre-COVID. Now, post-COVID, and so even leaving aside, they were going to school at least, right? So they were getting some, level of education at large, more or less, in whatever form. Post-COVID, now these 45 million students, they are not going to school. And if you look at the number of students who have direct access to devices at homes, we have about 1 million students. We only have in Pakistan 2 million landline DSLs connection as per the 2019 PTA report, which means, and then we have about 67 million 3G, 4G mobile subscribers in Pakistan, which means if you look at the kids, in our estimate, only about 1 million students in Pakistan have access to some kind of device which has some internet, a direct device. And about, the rest of the students, they are dependent on their parents' devices, so which we call, refer to that as a latent access. So, they do have some level of access, but that's not their own device to access. So now we also have an access challenge, and schools are really struggling. I mean, if you talk about the high-end school, like, in 900, where a million students are studying, obviously they have had much better infrastructure. Their students are from better demographics. They're paying good fees. So, I mean, they have the infrastructure where at least they, even if they want to start some, synchronous learning intervention, they could start that. So I think this is the biggest challenge for majority of the schools, that they're struggling. They don't know what to do, how to make it happen. Because if they do, most of them cannot do synchronous learning, which means that a student and teacher has to be online at the same time, just like we are having this conversation right among ourselves. So this is form of asynchronous learning. And not all schools have the capability in terms of their teachers, infrastructure, or their students have access to devices where they can do that. And that leaves us with, asynchronous learning, which means that you have to assign them some way, through some way, some kind of homework which they can do online, and you provide them resources, content, digital content, resources, feedback. So, I mean, that's just one part of the delivery, because when you go to school, you don't go to school just to get the information, right? Or, for just transfer of knowledge from teacher to student. But there is a lot of other aspects in education that we have to take care about, like, Jaweria was saying, it's about, how they feel, and, treating them as individuals and building their personalities, making them confident. And especially when we're talking about 21st century skills, then we have to think on how to make them, how to prepare them for future, and for uncertainty. And these are the things that school provides. Basically, it's not just that they are providing a source or information, okay, that this is the concept, you go through that, but also a lot of other things where they, make students go through activities, they give them homework, they check the homework, they provide feedback, so they close the feedback loop. So imagine now, most of the schools, they cannot do synchronized learning, right? And they don't have tools for asynchronous learning. They don't know how to use tools. Even if they are tools, they don't have content, right? How do they share the content with students on how to, for example, go through a video or an assessment? So these are the problems that schools are facing. They are struggling, and I think they're worried on what would happen. And I see that this situation is going to last longer. It's not going to go away. We cannot assume that we are able to resume schools the way we used to have, right? And so the new normal in education, in my opinion, or new normal in schooling would be that students won't be able to go to schools. Even if they go, they would go in shifts, or they would go, few times in a week. So you need to basically then rely more on other systems, on edtech solutions and content, and building that whole asynchronous learning framework, where basically a school is not providing homework for a student to go through that. They are, doing some discussions, they are providing feedback, they are, focusing on other aspects of their personality development. in a new paradigm, which is not going to be the same. So I think these are the challenges that I see. And if schools, they think that they are going to, they are waiting just to, for situation to get normal, I think that would be a wrong strategy. The school should assume that they cannot resume. The new normal would be like this, and they have to figure out ways. They have to look for solutions. They have to adopt solutions. They have to adopt. The teachers have to adopt, their administrations, they have to adopt, and they have to start interacting with students in altogether new ways with new digital tools and digital content, different digital ways of feedback, of engagement, and all that, with some limited access to school for limited settings, maybe once in a week or twice in a week. That's how I see things, and this is the challenge most of the schools are facing. And they're also afraid, in my opinion, since we are interacting with 730 schools, that if they don't provide value to um, you know uh, parents and students, because if they say, okay, they just assign the homework and parents have to sit with kids and do the homework, then parents are going to say, okay, why we are sending our kids to school, right? Even if you see why people send this their kids to for tuition after school. One of the big reasons is that they want to make sure that they are doing the homework that is assigned to them. And the tuition market is the most worst, or the worst market that was affected because of this COVID situation. I mean, even worse than school. So this leaves us a big kind of situation where schools, they are trying to figure out. And when I talk about school, I talk about all those, thousands of private schools which are, and private school first, uh, and then public schools. At least they are not doing anything. They are not even thinking about any solution at the moment, because on the public side, what we have done is that we have just started televised, started transmission on TV, and and that's the only solution that government is thinking to do, or they are not engaging schools or their teachers, or providing them with tools and technologies and digital content where they can start engaging students in the public sector. And access is a big issue there on the public sector side. And I think in general, access is a big issue. If you're only 1 million of your students can have direct access to some kind of device, be it a computer or a laptop or tablet at home, then we have to seriously now also figure out a way to solve this access issue.
It's true. And I think one of the points you mentioned, Talha, is also that now there is added responsibility on the parents' front as well, to ensure that the schooling of the child or their education is being monitored as well. Nassir Saab, what do you have to say about this, about the challenges, and what do you see are the foreseeable challenges in the future?
Yeah, no, I Talhah's covered a lot of ground.
Yeah.
I'll, see if I can add anything in there, but, it's, I think he hit the nail on the head in a lot of areas. I think that, I think that what's ended up happening is that, there's been a natural tendency to try to go towards technology to address, this learning gap that's come up because of the COVID closures. But they are, that is the best solution right now. But there are quite a few constraints and issues related with suddenly going to a completely online solution as well. So as Talhah was saying, there are device limitations. Now those device limitations don't only, I mean, I know for a very large number of students, the device limitations are far more dire, but even for, students going to, for example, Beaconhouse, in most of our students don't have, at least the younger ones, they don't have one-to-one access to a device, in the way that they need, for education. If you're, in for some things, intermittent access to a device is suitable. If you're ordering something online, you're ordering some food, there are a lot of online Careem, Uber, there are a lot of online services which just require like a few seconds of interaction, a few minutes, and then you utilize the service and you're done. Education is the sort of thing which requires continuous access for many hours a day. And, we've conducted surveys in our schools, and a very large number of students, the majority, in fact, particularly younger ones, don't have the level of regular daily access to devices that's required to really provide sort of the type of learning experience which we would, ideally like to do. It's difficult to find this balance. Talhah has already, I think, introduced everyone to the concept of synchronous and asynchronous learning. It's difficult to find the right balance of synchronous and asynchronous learning. You know, Parents tend to prefer more and more synchronous learning, which is a Zoom session like we have going on right now. There are two issues with that. One being that, in order for that to happen every day for multiple hours a day, kids really need that device, right? The reason parents prefer it is because then they don't have to do very much. The kids don't need a lot of extra support. The other issue with that is that sometimes it can lead to a very didactic sort of teaching, sort of style, which, as Talhah was saying, particularly, I think Jaweria and Nadine are both running, schools which are trying to, encourage kids to be creative. It's very difficult to be creative if someone is like on a Zoom session. Even though, yes, you can have conversations, there's a certain number of things you can do, but normally creativity happens, when you're creating essentially, right? So that's creation is a more asynchronous sort of activity. And what ends up, the problem ends up being that when you try to engage kids with a lot of asynchronous activity, then kids need to get more involved, especially with younger kids. Like, I'll give my personal example. I have a 10-year-old and a 7-year-old. And, the 10-year-old does really well with a mix of synchronous and asynchronous, and he's creating and he's doing stuff when the Zoom sessions aren't online. But my daughter, who's younger, every time she has to do, you need to provide a lot of scaffolding and support, which is difficult, when you're working. So if you're working, you're supporting your kids with asynchronous activity while you're working is very tough. So even if they have device access, providing the type of scaffolding at home that they require to really get the full educational experience without physically being at school isn't always possible. Quite often, both parents are working, or the mother is engaged in other household activities. In some cases, you have instances, where the mothers aren't totally comfortable with the technology. Maybe they're from another generation, the fathers are at office, so you end up with, those sort of issues. So it becomes, it does become challenging, to really give the type of schooling experience that, you get in a brick and mortar environment, fully online. Schools also provide a very, very good space, and environment, where kids can really, get the scaffolding they need to learn 21st century skills. Increasingly, we feel that education is more about, developing skills and attitudes than it is just about, knowledge acquisition. Technology now is such that, for example, if you want information, it's very, very easy to get. It's available on Google. Back during the Industrial Revolution, teachers were actually like repositories of information which you couldn't necessarily get easily from elsewhere. So, going to school and actually have someone talk to you and tell you something was meaningful because there was no other easy way of getting that information. Now you have Wikipedia, the internet, you can get more information than any teacher could ever give you, regardless of how brilliant they are, right? So, we kind of feel like the role of schools has changed, and or is changing. It's changed more in the West than it has in Pakistan, certainly, but more innovative schools over here are also changing, where they're now focusing on, teaching students to be collaborative, how to, engage in group work, leadership skills, communication skills, thinking out of the box. There are a lot of skills and attitudes that are integral to 21st century success. And I think my experience so far has been that it's not always easy to translate that type of education into a fully online medium unless the parents get highly involved with younger kids. Again, I think it becomes easier as you get as you get older, because you're more capable of self-directed learning. For younger kids, it's a major constraint. So how do you sort of, even if they have devices available, which they oftentimes don't, how do you really provide a meaningful educational experience that's not just purely didactic and pulled right out of, basically the 19th century, is something that is challenging for schools, and it's something we think about all the time.
That's true. Oh, so our audience has been really engaged. I don't know if you guys can see in the panel, the Q&A section, we have plenty of questions. So I do want to engage them as well. And I think that's how we can maybe start a healthier interactive discussion. So I'll start off with asking you guys a few questions, and then maybe we can, you can raise your hands or tell me who would like to answer some of them. We have Hadika Dilawar here. She's basically saying, and I'll read it out verbatim. Do you really think in a country like Pakistan, virtual tutoring can be a good idea? Some teachers aren't trained, some students don't have access to internet, and there are certain barriers sometimes that the app doesn't work and you can't really make the students work on a video or audio call. So do you think that's a good idea? Would any of you like to take this question?
I know I just spoke, so I'm not going to speak. I don't want to hog the mic. I just want to say one thing, because I believe the question was about virtual tutoring. Now, tutoring, I don't want to offend anyone here, but it's like the basest form of education, right? It's about as didactic and non-creative as, tutoring is basically quite often in Pakistan, when it comes to exams at least, it's just teaching people how to beat the exams, or, like cramming them full of information, or past exam papers, teaching them how to answer them. In fact, that's probably the one thing I think can probably be done effectively online, particularly for older students if they have device access. So I would say, yeah, education, more difficult, tutoring, easier, definitely.
All right. Talha, there's a question directed at you from Anis Rahman. He's saying, how to compare and define knowledge platform with Google Classroom / Google for Education?
Google Classroom is a platform which is only which only provides you like a shell to create, for example, or assign work to a cohort of students. So you create a class and you start assigning them different documents, and then you can track whether they have submitted. You can also give them some quizzes which are through Google Quiz, but it doesn't offer you any content. What we provide is a complete solution where when you go in, there's a system where, using which, so we have full digital lessons. Not only we provide the platform, but we also provide digital lessons, digital content. We have a content library of about 2,000 plus animated, high quality animated videos that most of them we have created in-house. We have a question bank library of about, now crossing 40,000 questions. And then we have 600 games and activities. So all of that is bundled together. It's done according to national curriculum, because we do realize, that was the whole idea of blended learning when we started our solution, which works in schools without internet. The idea was to make it, available to teachers as a tool where they can use basically a digital lesson to project using a simple laptop or projector, and then show these resources and do the assessment through the remote like devices, which are called clickers, and to track the performance of all the students. So we basically provide everything, the activities that, the content, the basic, informational content or activities, and then also different ways of evaluation, whether it's a formative evaluation or a summative, evaluation. So that's a basic difference, that we provide a package solution, and schools are using these to kind of, our solution to assign homework to students through the groups. they guide them, students respond to, to the groups, they upload their homework, then students get the feedback, I give them the feedback and all that. And we are certainly improving that whole user experience now further. That is one difference. Second is the personalized learning, that since our content is already developed and structured, right, we have done it in a way where we have converted the whole curriculum into about 3,000 plus skills, as we call them, which are like, the standards. If you know about, for example, in US Common Core, there are different standards that they define that, okay, by grade 5, you have to, grade 5 on the numeracy side, you have to do, a child should be able to do X, Y, Z. So these are the standards. So we have divided our national curriculum into 3,000 plus these kind of standards, and then we have created content on that. So advantage of that is that, first of all, we are able to customize the content according to a textbook that is being used by school, right? So for example, they say, okay, in chapter, we are using XYZ textbook and we are using this content in this textbook, then we can remap our digital content according to that format. So that's the advantage the schools are getting, and they are getting reports. And third advantage is personalized learning, which using our platform, because we have first generation of artificial intelligence already integrated, and now we are working on the second generation of AI, which is going to be creating a dynamic learning path for a student based on a diagnostic test, and then we would be also able to link. I mean, till now, we are able to link the weaknesses of a kid within a particular grade, right? But what we have to do is to link it, cross-link it across the grades, because the problem in Pakistan is that a ninth grader is, most of the ninth graders, they don't know the concepts of sixth graders. And this is the learning deficiency that they carry. And what you cannot do is to just fix ninth grade concepts and assume that you can fix, or you can improve their understanding, and you can, at least make them good learners by just focusing on content for a particular grade. So we have, I mean, it's a very complex environment. So that's why I think a solution like ours is different from what Google Classroom has to offer.
Okay. I hope that answers the question. There are actually a lot of questions coming in, so I'm quickly going to do justice and get them across to you. The next one is for Nadine and Nassir both. The question is that I feel like this virus, if the virus situation is bringing to light how the whole examination system, especially with our OA levels, is not always the best way forward. Does the IB system do better in these circumstances? And how do you think the old examination systems of education will adapt now? Yes, Nadine.
Okay, so I think that's a really interesting question. Or of course, how we design our assessment and how we train students and parents to look at assessment and interact with assessment is extremely crucial. So in many ways, I work at a campus that is an IB campus directly, but also Headstart, of course, the majority of Headstart branches are not IB. And so we have a live comparison. In the IB, every assignment is assessed. And based on the assessment, assessment of initial assignments, if we see students didn't understand what we taught, and it's obvious from their assessment that they're not performing, we will change future teaching. So in the IB, assessment drives instruction. And so, for high school grades, for example, when Cambridge and IB both said that we're going to base our your certificate, your exam तो नहीं होगा, तो उसके बजाय जो certificate आपको मिलेगा वो आपके coursework पे based होगा. IB schools didn't have a problem because they have to, it's mandatory for us to log all of our assignments and our scores, and that students and teachers both have to operate under really stringent, elaborate academic honesty checks. So for example, our school has to purchase a software called Turnitin, which we use to check student assignments for plagiarism. So there are a lot of tools and checks and balances ensuring that there is no plagiarism and that academic dishonesty on the part of teachers, on the part of school administrators, on the part of students or parents is not possible. And that if it is found, there are really, really dire consequences. Because of this, the IB students have not had an issue. But I'm sure that other people who are running O and A-level schools are aware of the situation for students who are applying for a certificate based on predicted grades. Because in addition to your predicted grades, the school is now, Cambridge is saying, आप evidence submit करें कि this grade, this predicted grade given by your teacher is based on what assignments. And most of our O and A-level schools don't do assignments. Teachers don't give questions or projects or presentations. आपको notes देते हैं, आप notes के base पे एक end of chapter test करते हैं. ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा आप homework करते हैं, उसको आपको वो आपको tick marks के साथ वापस मिलता है. In the IB, when we say you have to give feedback on an assignment, if a student does an essay, there's a rubric to score them, there's detailed feedback, and there's opportunities for that student to take the feedback and improve their work and get a better grade if possible. So yes, to answer Hassan Noon's question, absolutely, I think the IB is further along. Having said that, I think that there is no, this is a difficult situation when it comes to assessment in general. I think ensuring accountability is very difficult. मगर जैसे कहते हैं कि मुश्किल के साथ आसानी आती है. A lot of the gaps and problems in our system, in different systems of education, आप लोगों ने अभी तलहा और नासिर ने गवर्नमेंट की भी बात की और प्राइवेट स्कूलों की भी बात की, जो हमारे मसाइल हैं और जो हमारी कमज़ोरियाँ वो अब हमारे सामने हैं. और आई थिंक अगर हम में से बहुत सारे लोग, प्राइवेट स्कूल्स में भी बहुत सारे ऐसे लोग थे असातिज़ा में, एडमिनिस्ट्रेटर्स में, जो कह रहे थे कि नहीं बस अभी चल रहा है ऐसे, टेक्नोलॉजी के बगैर तो चलाएं. मगर आई थिंक ये अब सबके सामने आ गया. और ये कोविड का लॉकडाउन था. वी डोंट नो व्हेन द नेक्स्ट पैंडेमिक इज कमिंग and if it will be worse than this and if we'll be ready for it. So I think one takeaway from this situation is that we all need to really migrate to the 21st century. मुझे लगता है, just to wrap up, कि पाकिस्तान ये दो stark disparities के साथ हम कोप कर रहे हैं. एक तो पाकिस्तान के अंदर ही बहुत बड़ा फासला है उन बच्चों में जो जिनके पास अगर टीवी की नशरियात गवर्नमेंट स्कूल्स के लिए ब्रॉडकास्ट की जा रही है, उसको भी एक्सेस करना मुश्किल है. और उनके पास ऐसे वालिदैन घर पे शायद ना हो जो पढ़े लिखे हैं, जो उनकी मदद कर सकते हैं. एक तो इन बच्चों में और प्राइवेट स्कूलों के बच्चों में जो बहुत बड़ा फासला है, that is something that Pakistan needs to contend with, that we all as educators, as citizens need to really begin to think about urgently. And then there's another distance, jo Talhah ne kaha ki we are ranked 139 out of 145 in the world. एक पाकिस्तान के जो सबसे आप कहें बेस्ट इंस्टीट्यूशंस भी हैं या मोस्ट प्रिविलेज्ड इंस्टीट्यूशंस भी हैं, उनमें और बाकी दुनिया में जो फासला है वो भी बहुत बड़ा है, वो भी बहुत संगीन है. So I mean, at Headstart, I'm very conscious of the fact that I work at a school that is extremely privileged within the Pakistani context. But if we're trying to be an international school and we're trying to compete with the best schools in the world, we see constantly that we are short on resources in terms of training, in terms of human resource, in terms of sort of the kind of education background we and our teachers are coming from. So there's a lot of things to overcome. At Headstart, in Kuri, where I teach in the IB program, shifting to online learning was not a problem in a real way because we've been using Google Classroom for 2 years. We use an app to assess reading because it's more scientific. We use apps for mathematics. Our students and our parents are trained and they know how to use this. So I have a 3rd grader and I know that he will turn his device on or turn my device on. He will know that his device had to be charged on time and he can open it up and navigate it. And he doesn't need any help from me at all. And that's a huge, like Nassir was saying, that's a huge relief because he has been in a school where they've been using Google Classroom for 2 years. And the things that are challenging for us in terms of the COVID lockdown is what to do with children with special needs. So we have children with autism, and they should not be using a device for more than an hour a day, maximum 2 hours a day. We have students who are so savvy with their devices and their internet access that we really need to say, parents, please watch what they're doing. If they're getting into dangerous content, if they're misusing their device, if they're vulnerable to attacks from inappropriate adult users who are also able to reach them through their internet and their device. So वो फिर एक बिल्कुल ही फर्क दुनिया है और उसके मसाइल जो हैं वो भी बहुत संगीन हैं. So I think this is a big debate, and
it is. And I think so was a little bit of what you said. There was a question that popped up right while you were saying this. Humayun Zeb Abbasi basically directed a question to you and Jaweria, saying, don't you think that online education needs supervision too? We can't rely on our kids alone with these devices. And what do you guys have to say about that? So you pretty much did answer that your child does not require that supervision, but
no, but my child has, on all of our devices, we have Net Nanny. So if my child searches for a word, I get a notification. If someone messages my child, I get a notification. Net Nanny allows me to limit. So if my child has used the device for more than 3 hours, the device will shut down any internet automatically. And I think it's really important. हमारे पास बहुत सारे parents हैं जो कहते हैं मेरा बच्चा तो काम कर रहा था. हम कहते नहीं वो काम नहीं कर रहा था, आपको लग काम कर रहा है, मगर हो सकता है वो. How do you know unless you know? So internet safety, child protection, training kids to know कि आप अपने दोस्त को अपनी तस्वीर नहीं भेज सकते, हालांकि वो आपका दोस्त है, हालांकि ये एक innocent सी चीज़ है, मगर ये innocent चीज़ नहीं है. It's really dangerous to show yourself, show pictures of yourself, show pictures of your family. So yeah, that is a whole other conversation.
Jaweria, do you want to add anything to answer Humayun's question?
No, I think Nadine ने बहुत अच्छी तरह से answer कर दिया. These are the basic principles which we have to keep in mind if we're going on that. I think she has answered it well.
All right. Okay. I think I'll wrap up with just one more question. It's coming from Facebook from Furqan Said. It's a pretty lengthy one, but the gist of it is that, and I'm just going to read it out. Academic projects constitute over 50% of the freelance market, meaning students don't do their assignments themselves. Because of the COVID-19, I see the trend going even further up. Students outsourcing their online exams, etc. How can we upgrade the exam/testing criteria and methods? And yeah, that's pretty much it. There's a question mark at the end. Yes, Nassir.
Yeah, we're kind of this is one of the things that we're looking into right now. It's a very obvious concern that any school would have when it comes to online assessment. There are a number of software solutions which are available now, and I think increasingly, because it's a major need, more and more solutions are coming out. So for example, you can have a situation where the computer screen is locked and only the exam will run on the computer and nothing else. And one of the solutions which I would like to explore is to have a situation where you can also have because most laptops are equipped with cameras now. So if you can lock the user's screen into and I believe that there's software that does this. You lock a user into a particular screen, they can't open any notes on the screen, and then the camera is on recording them. So if you obviously see any unusual, suspicious activity or someone whispering in their ear, there's something going on. So I don't think it's foolproof, but there's software available for online examination to address specifically these sort of issues. Of course, when it comes to doing assignments and things like that, that's more complicated. How do you make sure that someone has done an assignment themselves, which they were supposed to hand in? And there's software like Turnitin and whatnot that checks for plagiarism. Even that's not 100% obviously foolproof, but there's technology out there. It is, I think, with online academic honesty is more challenging than it is in a school environment, where you can have people invigilating and monitoring. But I think with increased use of technology, you can reduce the instances of dishonesty and minimize. I mean, that technology is becoming, I think, more and more sophisticated by the day as people are realizing that there's now a tremendous need for it.
That's
Can I
true.
add something to that?
Yes, of course.
Acha, another thing that I do feel when it comes to academic integrity and all of that, this is all coming from a culture of distrust towards the child as well, because again, across the years, we have monitored the children and we have supervised them because we feel that innately the children would not learn, if they're left to their own devices, quite literally in this case. But this also goes back to the culture that we're trying to develop in these institutions when they were there physically present, and now in these online schools. So if we are testing them, to what end are we testing them, and how can we replace testing with something that's a bit more meaningful? If you just want to assess how much a child knows, can there be other means to look at it now rather than just going the old fashioned way? So जब हम online schools भी develop कर रहे हैं, what has to be at the center of it is what needs have to be met, and then you come up with solutions to those needs rather just figuring out how you can digitalize an existing school that is already there. So इसकी वजह से काफी schools में अभी खौफ भी है because people who are not innovating right now can actually close down and newer better solutions might take over. So everyone has to now give their best to come up with frameworks that meet these new needs that you have in this new sphere as well. And दूसरी बात ये है कि we're all very new to this. It will take time. Although it seems like COVID has been here forever, it's just been 2 months and these things do take time. हमारे लिए एक चीज that worked out very well was कि government की तरफ से एक notification आ गई थी कि आप इस time को summer vacation के तौर पे deal कर लें, use कर लें, and then come back on the 1st of June. So in those 2 months, we went through vigorous training for the teachers, and we tested a lot of tools. Literally, we created cheat sheets of what are the different tools that are available and all the kind of possibilities that are now open, which were perhaps not open before जब दूसरा school चल रहा था. Because physically जब school चल रहा होता है तो you're in day to day आपकी जब life चल रही होती है, तो you don't have the time and space to step back and train people extensively because everyone is in a rush. किसी ने जाके copies check करनी है, किसी ने notes check करने हैं, किसी ने they have to prepare for things, किसी ने lunch duty देनी है and all of these things. So we got some space and time to think about these things, and that really benefited us. And हमने अपनी जो professional development थी वो भी हमने open to the parents कर दी कि this is how we're talking about these things. यानी तलहा साहब ने देखी है या नहीं, he can tell us better whether it has worked or not. But this is something again which needs to be done in a manner which is organic. And since we're saying it is going to be here for foreseeable future, which means कि हमें जो भी steps लेने हमने it has to be an iterative process. हम करेंगे, we'll do a few things, we'll take feedback from our stakeholders, the parents and students, and assess what's working and what's not working. And we don't necessarily have to go back to वही कि कोई किसी का काम तो नहीं copy कर रहा, all of those things, या आपस में उन्होंने बात करके answer तो नहीं लिख दिया, because collaboration also has a very vital role in the life that we live right now. So maybe we also need to assess what is integrity now in terms of turning in the work that we have, and बाकी भी बच्चों की जो needs हैं उनको भी हमने assess करना. We're right now only talking about academic needs and how they can be met. But what about the social needs? Because जो बच्चा government school में भी जा रहा था, उसकी भी कुछ social needs थी. Early marriages से बचा लेते थे वो school, उन्हें घर की abuse से बचा लेते थे. A lot of those things, even though academics के stats share हुए, we haven't been doing so well academically as a country, but the schools were still offering some refuge. So what do we do for those kind of things is going to be important. And I think it's too early to say कि क्या क्या हो सकता है, but I do feel कि बहुत कुछ हो सकता है.
I agree. I think
that?
Yes, Sabeena.
Especially the plagiarism part, I think this is something which really personally drives me up, because I think when you think about education, you always think about, okay, what are actually the root causes? why is it that plagiarism is so high in Pakistan and that it's increasing as well, right? And basically जिस तरह के आपके students आप emerge कर रहे होते हो वैसे ही आपकी society form हो रही होती है. तो जो भी पाकिस्तान में major issues हैं जिस भी sector में, it stems from the kind of education that you actually have within Pakistan. और उसमें I think we all need to really question that. I think just like Nassir Saab said, that it's not about information anymore. It's not about knowledge anymore. I think what we all need to focus on is these values like integrity and honesty, and what do these mean, and what does knowledge mean? So knowledge just for the sake of, I don't know, getting a degree or getting a job, or knowledge for the sake of actually enhancing yourself. So I actually read a very beautiful research where they said that nowadays education is all about teaching you to get something, to do something, to become producers and consumers. It's actually not focusing on being a person, just being, simple as that. So I think these are things, and then after that, I think if we really question these things, these problems were always there. It's not like COVID-19 actually created these problems. Unfortunately, Pakistani education system was going in a downward direction, not in an upward direction. We had 22 million out of school children. Even the ones who were going to school, I'm sorry, the quality of education wasn't that high that we could say that we were really going in the right direction. And one of the main challenges, what I feel, is that there's no comprehensive vision as a Pakistani nation, which the education sector has. Everybody is following their own philosophy. I'm not saying anybody is right or wrong. However, everybody is following their own philosophy, and we're creating this stark divide within Pakistan, which is why if any smallest issue comes up, there's a huge, it's not even, we won't even call it a debate. It's like we're on to each other like animals. We don't even know the basic rules of, properly debating with each other. So that really shows that we are such a confused nation, because there's no grand vision, because of which I think every education institute is following their own strategy. I think even here, the five of us present here, we are all following our own philosophies. There's no central vision that we all can follow, which is, I think, the biggest problem. Second, I think, like Jaweria mentioned, the assessment is the biggest issue as well, if we focus on that. And thirdly, I think teachers, which is why I think so many edtechs are coming up, because of lack of quality teachers within Pakistan. So these are, I think, main issues which, even if COVID is here or not, we were facing them. I think we really need to focus on these three things.
That's true. Those are really good points, Sabeena. Thank you for sharing. I'll end with one last question. I think it's directed towards Nadine and Nassir Saab. It's by Maz Aslam saying, do you think Pakistan will move to a single syllabus in the near future, as told by the Prime Minister Imran Khan, or will both OA level and government board syllabus will remain apart as well? So, would you like to answer?
I think what the government has been wanting to do is move towards a single curriculum, basically, which I believe may well happen. Which is not altogether such a bad thing. I mean, I think, as Sabeena said, I think some degree of direction is always a good thing. A curriculum is a very basic document. It just sort of tells you what subjects you're supposed to learn, when you're supposed to learn them. It gives a very broad sort of outline. There's, even within that, there's room for a lot of flexibility in terms of, how you teach. I think how you teach is actually more important, than what you teach. There's a lot of debate about whether there should be a single national curriculum or not. I think, provided that there remains flexibility in how the teaching is done, because I think one thing which is exceptionally important is that parents and students should have the freedom of choice. Different people may want different types of education for their children. I think that's something that exists everywhere in the world. So that should be encouraged. Parents should continue to have different options in terms of what type of teaching methodology they want their child's school to have. So as long as I think it's not overly prescriptive, and we've been trying to work with the government, convince them that it would not be a good idea to make it overly prescriptive where everyone has to learn the same thing in the same way, using the same books at the same time, and think exactly the same thing. In which case, we may as well stop calling ourselves human beings and start calling ourselves the Borg. I don't know if any of you have seen Star Trek, but any society to get anywhere needs to be able to have differences of opinion respectfully and have debate and discourse. So as long as I think whatever system they have allows for that divergence of view in a respectful manner to take place and give schools a bit of flexibility to tune the provision of education to their parents and students' needs, then I think it's not necessarily altogether a bad thing either. But yeah, they are wanting to move in that direction certainly.
Can I
All
add
right.
to that? I mean, I
Yes,
think
of
that
course.
I completely agree with what you said. मुझे मुझे लगता है कि वाकई में करिकुलम एक होना पूरी बात नहीं होगी. करिकुलम सिर्फ एक डॉक्यूमेंट है कि आपने क्या पढ़ाना है. हमें जैसे अगर हम पाकिस्तान भर के IGCSE कैम्ब्रिज स्कूल्स को देखें या O लेवल्स वाले A लेवल्स वाले स्कूल्स देखें तो कैम्ब्रिज हमें एक सिलेबस देता है, एक करिकुलम देता है, और वो किताबें रेकमेंड करते हैं कि उनकी कैम्ब्रिज अप्रूव्ड जो टेक्स्ट बुक होती है जो उनको लगता है उनके मयार की है वो बताते हैं, उस पे उसके कवर पे उनको छापने की इजाज़त मिलती है कि ये. मगर बहुत सारी बुक्स हैं, हो सकता है कि मैं एक बुक यूज़ करूं और बीकन हाउस कोई दूसरी बुक यूज़ करे और कोई दूसरा ट्यूटर जो घर पे तैयार कर रहा है वो कोई दूसरा अपनी बुक्स खुद बनाए. बहुत सारे जो teachers होते हैं who are working with the Cambridge curriculum produce their own content and their own resources to teach.
That's
So
true.
as long as you have that flexibility, the problem with one curriculum for everybody is not the curriculum at all. The problem is the validity and the fairness of the exam. So अगर आप मेट्रिक का एग्जाम देखें, क्या वो एक फेयर एग्जाम है? क्या जो एग्जाम चेक कर रहे हैं, जो एग्जामिनर्स हैं, क्या वो ऑनेस्टली और फेयरली और विदाउट एनी चीटिंग, उसके क्या चेक्स एंड बैलेंसेस हैं? हाउ रिगरस आर दोस checks and balances? So in Cambridge, Cambridge gives you, the Cambridge exam is the equivalent of an armored vehicle that will everything. I mean, it's when you are a center for a Cambridge exam, you have to have a safe room with metal walls and metal doors and like a bank safe. That is the level of security and scrutiny that they have. Their examiners are highly paid so that there's no cheating. क्या हमारे एग्जाम्स इस मयार के होंगे कि हम पूरी दुनिया में अपना फिर मैट्रिक का सर्टिफिकेट लेके जाएंगे and everyone will say this metric certificate represents quality. Someone who has gotten a top grade on their metric certificate is truly worthy and इसका कुछ मतलब है, इसकी कोई शान है इस सर्टिफिकेट की. फिर आप लोगों को मतलब फ्री में भी O levels A levels पढ़ाएं तो कोई पढ़ने को नहीं तैयार होगा. It's so expensive. Why are Pakistanis investing so much of their hard-earned money to get these foreign qualifications? Why wouldn't they just do the local one? It's because the local one has an inflated value because of the lack of fairness, because the lack of transparency and the lack of professionalism. So जो लोग इमोशनल हो जाते हैं और जैसे सबीना ने बिल्कुल सही कहा, हम एक दूसरे को खाने के लिए तैयार हो जाते हैं, मारने के लिए तैयार होते हैं. कितना अच्छा लगेगा कि सब हम एक करिकुलम पढ़ें. और अक्सर प्राइवेट स्कूल में जो काम करते हैं उन लोगों को ऐसे पोर्ट्रे किया जाता है जैसे हम शायद शैतान हैं जो चाहते हैं कि पाकिस्तान टूटे और तबाह हो जाए. खुदा न खास्ता, हम तो पढ़ा रहे हैं बच्चों को और हमें कितना अच्छा लगेगा कि हम किसी फॉरेन सिलेबस के बजाय एक लोकल सिलेबस पर, एक होम ग्रोन सिलेबस पढ़ाएं. सिर्फ ये है कि वो हमें फेयरनेस, वो ट्रांसपेरेंसी और वो अकाउंटेबिलिटी, अगर हम अपने इंस्टीट्यूशंस को स्ट्रॉन्ग करें, मजबूत करें और इनमें जस्टिस और प्रोफेशनलिज्म लाएं, अकाउंटेबिलिटी और ट्रांसपेरेंसी लाएं तो कोई मार्केट ही नहीं रहेगी किसी भी फॉरेन क्वालिफिकेशन की। हमें कहीं नहीं जाना पड़ेगा। आपको घर की रोटी अच्छी मिलती है तो आप कहीं जाके रेस्टोरेंट में नहीं खाते। जब घर का किचन ही बंद हो, कोई खाना ना पका, फिर आप कहते हैं भाई कहाँ से खाना मंगवाएं। तो ये मैं नासिर से एग्री करूंगी, बात उन्होंने बिल्कुल सही की। जब तक हालात बेहतर नहीं होते तब तक चॉइस देनी चाहिए। अगर चॉइस ही इतनी, गिव पीपल एन ऑफर दे कांट रिफ्यूज एंड दे वोंट रिफ्यूज इट।
एक और छोटी सी चीज है Sanya, I just want to add because I think ये बहुत अंडर रिप्रेजेंटेड इशू है, बट ये बहुत मेजर इशू है, and people are listening and again great people are on this panel as well. हमारे मुल्क का सबसे बड़ा मसला एजुकेशन का लैंग्वेज का है. It's not a curriculum problem that we have because आप curriculums उठा के देखिए more or less across the board university एक ही जैसे होते हैं, आगे पीछे थोड़ी बहुत बातें होती हैं, but obviously more or less curriculums एक ही जैसे होते हैं. But the problem right now that our country has is a language problem. तो ये करिकुलम अगर आता है तो इसको सपोर्ट करने के लिए जो कंटेंट होगा, जो कॉन्टेक्स्ट डेवलप होगा, वो कितनी लैंग्वेजेस में आएगा, वो किस तरह आएगा. बिकॉज राइट नाउ हमारे गवर्नमेंट स्कूल्स भी इंग्लिश मीडियम स्कूल्स हैं, लेकिन उनकी सिर्फ टेक्स्ट बुक्स इंग्लिश में हैं. ना उनकी टीचर्स को इंग्लिश आती है, ना उनके बच्चों को इंग्लिश आती है. तो ऑब्वियसली जब टीचर्स को नहीं आती है तो वो जिस तरह उनको आगे ट्रांसफर करती हैं, आइडिया सिंथेसाइज नहीं करते हैं, कनेक्ट नहीं होते, एक्सटेंड नहीं होते, चैलेंज नहीं होते. हमारे मुल्क में 75% of the children by the age of 10 are not reading a single sentence. This is a huge crisis and the crisis exists because of this language problem. अगर पठान बच्चे को पश्तो में आप एटलीस्ट अर्ली ईयर्स में एजुकेशन लेने देंगे, उसके आइडियाज ग्रो करेंगे, उसका कॉन्फिडेंस ग्रो करेगा. बट उसी बच्चे को जब आप you start with saying कि you have to only speak in English, या आपका content है, आपने इंग्लिश की ही किताब पढ़नी है, they're not really able to develop further. उनका exposure नहीं build हो पाता, तो वो चीजें ही नहीं समझ आ रही होती कि ये लिखा हुआ है. They can read phonetically but they cannot understand things. So this is another thing I feel कि rather than just focusing on a universal curriculum policy, which can also work, and as we said, it can give a unified vision to the country, we also need to focus on the language, because even Urdu जो है पंजाब में less than 5% बच्चे अपने घरों में बोलते हैं. So maybe this is another thing that the government now needs to start thinking about.
I think
that's true.
I would like to add too. I think this is a great opportunity. I think the current crisis has given us to kind of rethink about education and purpose of education, and this factory style education that we are giving to our kids. I think like Ken Robinson says, do school skills creativity. And I think one of the key issue is that we don't recognize the difference between schooling and education. And we are still having the same debate of exam, and what we are trying to replicate actually is that we are trying to replicate the same model of education in an online medium, which I think is not the probably right way. We have to think why kids go to school. If you ask, they go to school for learning, what do you think would be the answer? They don't go to school for learning, right? If you ask any kid why you go to school for learning, would they say, oh, I go to learn, they would say, I go to school to kind of, meet my friends and all that. And, they go through that whole social experience that builds their personality in the schools. They don't go to kind of, only they don't want to. If you give them a choice, they won't go. What we are trying to do is to, even if we, what I'm trying to say is that if we try to replicate the same model in an online way and think that, okay, we have to teach all the curriculum, all the aspects, in the same way we try to replicate. We have to think about a new model, in my opinion, in this context, where you start teaching them or focus them on the core skills that you need to focus, which is essential. One of the great blessings that will come with this, first of all, is that if the journey was supposed to take 10 years in EdTech, now that journey will happen within a year, right? Number one. Number two, whatever we have to teach them, we have to rethink on the core skill. We have to think, okay, what is necessary to get to, let's say, grade 9 and 10th or 8? What is necessary to teach to a kid by primary grades? What are the core skills we need to focus on? And we need to just then focus on building on those core skills, and also the skills that are outside curriculum, which are really important for the future, which most of the my colleagues shared, that it's more important for them to create things, do things. This is the real education. This is the real when they start solving problems, and you just guide them. So if you tell them on how to learn, they can figure out the way on how to learn, right? But one of the key objectives, I would say, for schools is to enforce that discipline. If you see, basically schools enforce the discipline. Okay, you have to go through that child. If you ask a kid, okay, you have to write this alphabets 10 times, or you have to write this story, or you have this exam, they won't go for it if they have a choice. But there is some discipline. There needs to be a lot of, I think we have a limited choice, but we have to start giving more choices. We have to start thinking about new ways of solving this curriculum problem, which I believe that teaching everyone or making them go through all these hundreds of standards and skills, even if they don't want to do that or proceed or do that, or or use that in their lives. I mean, what I remember in my master's or bachelor's degree are the only 15 or 20% things that I use on daily basis. And even the concept that I did during when I was at school, I was going to school, which means that basically if I need to do or solve a problem, I can go online and I can learn. If my son can go online, and if he has an interest in something, and if we create that whole ecosystem choice environment where they know how to find something, how to learn, and do something with a choice, with passion, I think that's something that we have to start doing in an online context, because it would be extremely difficult to transition into a new normal in education unless we think about these motivational, these emotional aspects of students and their parents.
It's true.
It has
And I
to be
think
a
what
part
you
of the framework, I think. That's the key. Social, emotional, and academic learning of the child should not be a byproduct of going to the school. There has to be a framework for all of these things that I might have summarized.
Absolutely.
For you.
And I think, Talhah, some of the things you just suggested, it begs us to also think whether in the future there might be the birth of skill centers apart from educational centers, because then skills are also a focus for children growing up as well. There are so many interesting questions, and I would love to have you guys here and answer all of them and have this discussion going forward, but I know we are short on time as well. What I would like to suggest is that in the coming future, in a couple of months or in the next month or so, I would like to invite you guys again, just so that we could keep this discussion going, invite more people, so that I think the more we discuss this, there might be some new ideas or new solutions coming forward as well. And I feel personally that when all of these institutions come together, there is some sort of a solution or best practices that we can come up with together as well. I'd like to thank you all for taking out your time from your evenings today for the NIC and for all the audience as well. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope we answered most of your questions as well. And then obviously keep tuned in, so that in the future we will be having a new segment of the new normal in education again. Thank you, Nassir Saab. Thank you, Talhah, Nadine, Jaweria, Sabeena. You guys have been amazing panelists. It's been a very nice discussion. And I hope that we can continue this very soon.
Thank you for
Thank
hosting
you
it.
so much for being
Thank
on
you,
the panel.
everyone. Have a
Thank
good
you for
evening.
inviting
Take
us.
care, everyone. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Take care. Have a lovely evening. Bye-bye.
You too.